Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions: the mystery of the Atacama skeleton, the mummified being with unusual DNA that stunned scientists. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 2003, a skeleton 15 centimeters long was found in the Atacama Desert of Chile, inside a leather pouch, near a ghost town called La Noria. It had an elongated skull, only 10 ribs where humans have 12, and bone density suggesting it was 6 to 8 years old at the time of death, yet it was the size of a human fetus. For a decade, it circulated in private collections and attracted intense speculation about its origin. When Stanford researchers Garry, Nolan, and Atul Butte performed DNA analysis in 2013, they confirmed it was human. When they sequenced the full genome in 2018, they found something unexpected: 7 rare mutations simultaneously affecting genes that govern bone growth, skeletal development, and aging. The skeleton was not alien. It was not a hoax. It was a human child with a combination of genetic conditions so rare that medicine had never previously recorded it. The science raised as many questions as it answered. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the global puzzle of unexplained ancient construction. And to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Catastrophism, the idea that Earth's geological and cultural history has been shaped by sudden, violent events rather than purely gradual processes, was once the dominant paradigm in science. It was then largely displaced by uniformitarianism, the principle championed by Charles Lyell in the 19th century, that the present is the key to the past, and that change occurs slowly and continuously. The pendulum has since swung back. Modern geology and astronomy have confirmed that catastrophic events, asteroid impacts, supervolcanic eruptions, rapid climate shifts, have profoundly shaped Earth's surface and life upon it. The Chicxulub impact that ended the Cretaceous is the most famous example, but it is not alone. The Younger Dryas cooling event 12,000 years ago caused radical shifts in human habitat within decades, not millennia. The Bronze Age collapse 3,000 years ago ended multiple interconnected civilizations in a generation. These events matter for archaeology because they reset the evidence. A major catastrophe does not merely destroy a civilization, it destroys the record of that civilization. Survivors carry only what they can remember, and memory degrades with each generation. After a few centuries, the grandchildren of survivors have myths where their grandparents had engineering manuals. What archaeologists find when they excavate ancient sites is not the full picture. It is the fragment that survived the last catastrophe. The full picture may be forever gone, preserved only in the ambiguous traces that puzzle researchers to this day. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Atacama skeleton, the mummified being with unusual DNA that stunned scientists, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The skeleton designated Otta was discovered in 2003 near La Noria, an abandoned nitrate mining town in the Atacama Desert of northern Chile. It was found inside a leather pouch and subsequently sold into private ownership, eventually reaching Spain, where it was purchased by a collector. The arid conditions of the Atacama, one of the driest places on Earth, preserved the skeleton with the desiccated soft tissue partially intact, giving the remains a mummified appearance that intensified speculation about their nature. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered Otta measures 15 centimeters in total length with an elongated skull, a receding forehead, and only 10 pairs of ribs rather than the 12 pairs found in typical human anatomy. Its bone density, assessed by multiple radiologists, is consistent with a child of 6 to 8 years of age, rather than a fetus or newborn. These features, the size of a fetus combined with the bone development of a child, are the central biological paradox that drove scientific investigation and sustained public interest for more than a decade. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine initial DNA analysis in 2013 by Garry Nolan of Stanford University's Department of Microbiology and Immunology confirmed that Otta was unambiguously human and female, with mitochondrial DNA showing ancestry consistent with indigenous South American populations from the Atacama region. The finding ruled out extraterrestrial origin and established a baseline from which deeper genomic analysis could proceed. Nolan's team subsequently undertook whole genome sequencing to identify the specific genetic anomalies responsible for the skeleton's unusual features. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, whole genome sequencing, published in the journal Genome Research in March 2018 by Nolan, Atul, Butte, and colleagues, identified 7 rare mutations affecting genes associated with skeletal development and bone growth. The implicated genes include those governing production of structural proteins in bone and cartilage. Multiple mutations simultaneously affecting these pathways would produce profound skeletal dysplasia, premature bone maturation, and severe developmental abnormalities consistent with all of Otta's observed features. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the question of Otta's age at death remains scientifically unresolved. The bone density is inconsistent with a premature fetus or stillborn infant. One interpretation is that the mutations caused premature skeletal maturation, producing adult equivalent bone density in a fetus or infant who survived briefly or not at all after birth. Another interpretation holds that Otta survived for several years in a severely compromised state. Neither interpretation has been definitively confirmed by the available evidence. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The circumstances of Ada's discovery raise significant ethical and legal questions. The skeleton was removed from Chile without authorization, sold through private channels, and eventually reached Spain before coming to scientific attention. Chilean human rights groups have argued that Ada represents human remains deserving legal protection and repatriation under Chilean law. The skeleton was apparently found in a region where illegal grave robbing of indigenous and historic sites has historically been common, and its initial removal from the country violated Chilean cultural heritage law. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological errors. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Atacama skeleton, the mummified being with unusual DNA that stunned scientists. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that Garry, Nolan, and Atul, Butte's 2018 peer-reviewed analysis concluded that Ada was a human child, most likely a fetus or infant, with a rare and severe combination of genetic mutations causing skeletal dysplasia, premature bone maturation, and multiple congenital abnormalities. This is the consensus scientific position. The simultaneous occurrence of 7 relevant mutations is extraordinarily rare but not impossible, and the mutations identified are real variants in real human genes with documented effects on skeletal development. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence. But it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that extraterrestrial or alien-human hybrid origin was the explanation promoted by UFO researchers and documentary filmmakers who had access to Ada before the Stanford analysis. This interpretation has no support in the genomic data. Ada's DNA is fully human with clear indigenous South American ancestry. No genetic marker, chromosomal abnormality, or sequence variant inconsistent with human biology was identified by Nolan's team or any subsequent analysis. The alien hypothesis has been definitively refuted by the sequencing data. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that premature fetus that survived briefly outside the womb, the most conservative biological explanation, is inconsistent with the bone density findings. A typical premature infant of Ada's size would have bone density far below what radiology found. The premature birth hypothesis requires the simultaneous acceptance of both extreme prematurity and advanced skeletal maturation, which in turn requires the genetic mutations identified by Nolan's team to explain the maturation anomaly. The fetal hypothesis and the mutation hypothesis are therefore not alternatives, but complementary findings. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Atacama skeleton, the mummified being with unusual DNA that stunned scientists, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes Nolan et al.'s 2018 paper in Genome Research identified 7 specific mutations in genes, including COL1A1, COL2A1, and others governing bone and cartilage development. These mutations are documented in the Human Genome Database as variants associated with skeletal dysplasia, dwarfism, and related conditions. The paper is peer-reviewed, published in a major scientific journal, and has not been challenged on its core genomic findings by any subsequent research group. It represents the most thoroughly DNA-analyzed mysterious skeleton in scientific history. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented radiological assessment of Ada's bone density by multiple independent radiologists consistently placed skeletal maturation at the equivalent of a 6 to 8-year-old child. This finding is the central biological anomaly and has not been disputed. It rules out the simplest explanations that Ada was a normal premature fetus or a mummified newborn, and requires a genetic explanation for why bone maturation occurred at an abnormal rate in a body of fetal size. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed Chilean human rights organizations and governmental agencies have identified Ada as human remains subject to Chilean cultural heritage law and have demanded repatriation from Spain. The legal and ethical case for repatriation is supported by the genome finding of indigenous South American ancestry, which places Ada within the cultural heritage of Chilean indigenous communities. The case has highlighted ongoing problems with the illegal export of human remains and archaeological material from South American archaeological sites. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Atacama skeleton, the mummified being with unusual DNA that stunned scientists. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Nolan and Butte's peer-reviewed conclusion, rare genetic syndrome, not alien origin, is accepted by the scientific community. Chilean government pressure for repatriation of otters remains has continued, and the legal status of the skeleton in Spain remains contested. Nolan has noted that the specific mutation combination identified in otter has potential medical implications for understanding rare skeletal dysplasias in living patients. The otter case has also contributed to broader discussions about the ethics of scientific analysis of human remains obtained through illegal channels, a question that has no clean resolution when the scientific findings are genuinely valuable. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Atacama skeleton, the mummified being with unusual DNA that stunned scientists, from the historical record, the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Atacama Skeleton ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.